What is good, ex-homies? It's your boy Jacob Gooden, and we're back in the Ex-Homeschoolers Clubhouse. This is the best ex-homeschooler show this side of the internet. And I'm stoked for today because I've got a brand new ex-homeschooler friend. That is Jeremy Alder. And we're going to get into his whole story. We're going to get into how he grew up in like rural Texas and basically was like the first homeschooler in that area, to kind of like finding and making friends. We're going to walk through his journey after the homeschool years and finding his career. And then we're going to talk about like who he is today. He's a stand-up comic. And that's kind of honestly why we got connected, because Jeremy is dropping his debut album on April 25th. It's already out at the time that this is dropping, but go give it a listen. It's super funny. It's called Almost a Grown Man. JeremyAlder.com. It's going to be linked in the description. It might be popping up on the screen if you're watching this in video. Yeah, go give it a listen. Go give him some support. See if he's coming to a city near you. And I don't know, if you enjoy comedy like I do, you maybe want to go see it live and in person. But yeah, Jeremy is hilarious. He makes a bunch of jokes about being raised homeschooler and fundamentalist Christian, and he's just hilarious. But we had such a great time chatting about his past and the future. And so I hope you guys will really enjoy it. But before I turn it over to past me and past Jeremy, I do want to ask a favor of you guys. I've got a newsletter. I would love to have you on there. So if that's something you're interested in, link is going to be in the description to hop on the newsletter. All it takes is just your email address. I send it out about once a week, maybe sometimes every 2 weeks. But yeah, it's just, what's going on in my life, what I'm reading, what I'm watching, links to this podcast, links to other shows, whatever. It's just fun. It's just meant to be fun. If there's something you want to see on there, hit me up. So, all right, I'm going to turn it over to past me, from future me, from past, whatever, however this works. We're going to turn it over to past me. Jeremy, we're here. I'm stoked to have you on the Ex-Homeschoolers Club. I'm stoked to get to know you a little bit more. First and foremost, welcome to the Ex-Homeschoolers Club.
Thank you, Jacob. It's great to be here. I love this idea for a podcast.
Thank you.
I like to think
Thank
of
you.
all of us ex-homeschoolers as a big, weird club.
Yeah, pretty much. I can't take all the credit for it because my homeschool group that I grew up with during the COVID couple years in there, they started a Facebook group, and it was like the Ex-Homeschoolers Club of Ventura County. And so
Oh, I
I
love
was
it.
like, yeah, so I was like, I'm gonna steal that, I think, which hopefully they don't mind that I kind of took that moniker from them. But here we are, we're in the club. I'm stoked to have you today. You are a stand-up comic. You are an ex-homeschooler. You grew up in a fundamentalist Christian household.
Yep.
You've got an album coming out called Almost a Grown Man. So we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But I really wanted to kind of let's start back in the homeschool days and
Okay.
run me through what like a day to like a week of what the homeschool world looked like for you in the Alder household.
Yeah.
It sounds like rural Texas.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Just outside San Antonio. Yep. So South Texas. And well, we started mid 80s. My mom started home, and I say we because it was me. I have an older brother, an older sister, and a younger brother who was not in school when we first started homeschooling. But I did initially my first 2 years of school, kindergarten and first grade, were in a small kind of private school connected to a little fundamentalist church in San Antonio. And then my mom pulled, and that's where my siblings went to. And then my mom pulled us all out and started homeschooling us. And, at the time in the mid 80s, there was not the homeschool community that there is now.
Right.
It was very rare. I didn't know any other homeschoolers. I didn't know that was even an option, until my mom said that's what we were doing. And of course, for a kid, the idea of, oh, I don't have to go to school anymore. That's great. I mean, of course,
Yeah.
that's fantastic. But it came with a lot of, I know it wasn't easy for my mom, because what she was doing was so weird. And I know like our extended family was not on board with it. I think, the people at our church even. Homeschooling is very common now, and I think in
Yeah.
fundamentalist churches, but at the time, we were the only ones in our church, and it wasn't a tiny church. I mean, there were a lot of kids my age, but the attitude was, you know, you want your kids in school to be salt and light for the unbelievers, right? So like,
Right.
what are you doing pulling them out? But anyway, my mom just felt like it was what she was supposed to do, that she wanted more, I guess, control over shaping who we became and what the influences were on us. And so she just went for it. And I don't remember this because I guess I was like 6 or 7, but my mom said our first year homeschooling curriculum was composed entirely of the Bible and Highlights magazines. I don't know if you remember Highlights magazines,
I
but you
do. I remember going to the doctor
the
office and it was
doctor's office or
always,
the
yep.
dentist's office. Yeah. Yeah. So apparently that was my first year of schooling, which is why I guess I'm so good at like finding the difference between two pictures, like I'm just
Yeah.
expert level at that. But yeah, Goofus and Gallant were my first two like people I looked up to.
Yeah.
So she was kind of winging it,
Hmm.
and um, and so I got to give her a lot of credit. I know it took a lot of courage, and it was a heck of a lot of work because she was
Yep.
basically, my dad worked full time, and he was involved some, but not like during the day. It was mostly just her, and then me and my 3 siblings, and so um, I don't remember a lot of like the typical day, like early on. I know that we always started with like a Bible study
Okay.
and and prayer and like I remember we did a lot of like memorizing of scripture, and that would be like how we would start the day, was trying to remember whatever uh, psalm we were memorizing. But yeah, and then we would at some point all gather around the kitchen table
Yeah.
and get at it. I remember my mom at least eventually got like a planning book that she had where it was like a calendar, and she had each of our names um, and like each day of the week, and next to our names was like our assignments for each day that we were supposed to do. Um, and so at least eventually it became fairly structured,
Okay.
uh, you know.
Yeah.
And we did end up getting a curriculum eventually. It was kind of a mishmash of, well, I think I graduated from Highlights magazines to the ACE curriculum,
Okay.
which was the curriculum we used at the school I was at, which was like a mail-in kind of. I'm trying to remember what ACE stood for, but it was like
I,
a
I definitely I've definitely
self-paced.
heard of that before.
Okay,
So I think it's really interesting because in the homeschool world, there's the big one that everyone talks about is a Becca
right,
curriculum being
right,
like the thing, and
yeah,
then I have heard of ACE before, um, but a lot of them it's so interesting because a lot of those curriculums are just built for like more of a traditional school setting or a
yeah,
private school setting, right? So a room of kids, and then you're trying to apply it to sometimes the at home, because I started with a Becca, and similar to you, I had like I did kindergarten, first grade, I went to public school.
okay,
um Unlike you, I didn't want to homeschool. Like I was like, you're taking me away from all my friends. Like, yeah, I want to
yeah,
sleep in, but at the same time I was like, I have friends now, mom, you're taking all the way. But
yeah,
anyway,
yeah,
it was definitely it was interesting because like you, like my mom also was like, there's a shift in there that it's like it's a hard transition to get into a rhythm where you're like, what am I supposed to do now, right? Like, if you don't have a
yeah,
structure, you end up with the Bible and Highlights magazine for a
hmm,
year, right? Of like trying to figure out like, what is this? And I can't even imagine. I'm more a product of the 2000s era of homeschooling, and so there was definitely a lot more resources I feel like available at that point.
yeah.
Also, we had the internet, um, but yeah, I can't imagine being someone in the 80s, in the 90s, kind of being like, I, what do we do? Where do I go for this?
Yeah, right, right. There was no internet, and in fact, we weren't even sure it was entirely legal,
Okay.
because I remember my mom telling us that um, she was like, if basically if men in suits drive up the driveway and come to the door, don't answer it. You come and get
Wow.
me, because they might be trying to make you go back to school.
Oh man.
Yeah, so I know there was some um yeah, because like I said, it just wasn't, there weren't a whole lot of people doing it. So like I don't think the laws around it had been entirely clarified. Because technically, from one perspective, and I used to make a joke about this, that like homeschooling is just truancy for white kids, right? Like
Yeah,
you
pretty
could just
much.
get away with it. No one asked any questions, right? And and I think at some level it really might have been that, you know. And so when we were out in public, you know, I was always a little bit nervous around like police officers, because I
Yeah.
was like, do they are they going to wonder why I'm not in school? And what do I say? Am I going to get in trouble? Am I going to get my whole family in trouble? And am I going to get my mom in trouble? You know? So it was a little bit sketchy that at the beginning, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and not having
That's
internet, you couldn't just Google, is it legal in Texas? Right?
right. Right.
You just couldn't. So, yeah,
I think it's interesting too, is you talked about how also your extended family wasn't, and even your church was maybe not like fully on board with it,
yeah,
where like that's also, I mean, that's also playing a role in that feeling of just like, okay, like we're doing something weird, like you said, like is this illegal? How do we handle stuff?
yeah,
You know, I can't say that I've ever had really that fear. I mean, by the time I was 16, I was like driving. My mom would send me to go do the grocery run by myself,
sure.
but it would be like 10 o'clock in the morning,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I wasn't really afraid of, am I going to get in trouble? Because I could just say, I'm homeschooled, I did school last night. It's
Right,
all good,
right.
and they could look it up. There's, a whole process of like, here's how to, in California, and that's where I grew up. It was, it's very much like, here's a whole process of how do you make your school a legitimate school, and
Right. Yeah,
all that stuff. But
yeah.
that's such a interesting experience, and so I was wondering, like, was there a point where, I don't want to say it became more legitimized in your brain, but like you talked about also the transition into, you guys started to get a curriculum.
Yeah.
Did you guys also find other homeschoolers
Yeah.
in the area
Oh
that
yeah.
you could kind of bond with?
Yeah. Yeah. By the time I became a teenager, it was completely different.
Okay.
There was a group, we were part of a very large homeschooling co-op or network in San Antonio that, that had all kinds of resources. They had like a homeschooling bookstore. We had a gym. We had a basketball league. We had like certain classes that you could take as a part of the co-op that different parents would teach that had expertise in certain subjects. There was like debate clubs and drama, and so like it became more like a almost a private school experience a little bit, because we started to connect with other people. So yeah, by the time we got, and it was clarified by then. By then, like I feel like between the mid 80s and the early 90s, homeschooling experienced like a renaissance.
Yeah.
And I think my mom was just like on the frontiers of it. And because it felt very common and not at all that weird by the time I was a teenager, which is pretty quick.
Yeah.
And so, and by then, like, I think most or all of our family had come around to it. The people in our church, in fact, I think the pastors of our church, if I remember correctly, apologized to my parents for, giving them grief about it initially, because they came to embrace homeschooling and see the benefits of it. And so yeah, so it definitely changed. And what also changed was by the time I became a teenager, I started to wish that I was in school. I didn't want to be homeschooled anymore,
Okay.
So I started out really enjoying it, and then started to feel like I was missing out on certain things,
Yeah.
I just wanting more friends and connection, and more like I was into sports and stuff, and we had that as homeschoolers, but it was definitely an inferior product, to
Yeah.
put it mildly. So so yeah, to answer your question, it did kind of normalize and become less of a weird thing, you know.
Yeah.
But I always felt weird. I,
Oh yeah.
I still do, and I think that's just a part of it. Like you never fully feel like you fit in or you get what's going on because I did miss out on this entire like 10 to 15 year span of like popular culture that
Yeah.
because for me we were very like not all homeschoolers are like this, but we were like we didn't have a TV. We
Right.
weren't allowed to listen to the radio or secular radio. We didn't have access to like we didn't go to the movies much. You know, it was just very like very sheltered. So I didn't really know what was going on. Like what are kids talking about? What are they into, you know? I didn't get it.
I somewhat feel that. Like I also had that protective growing Christian homeschool values, very plugged into like church. Church was kind of like the one of the big outlets of
Right.
like that's where your friends are.
Sure.
That's where,
Sure. Yep.
sometimes sports were there, sometimes, youth group.
Right.
That was just kind of my place. And I had some friends in that youth group who were public school kids, which was like, oh wow, but also there's this kind of it's funny because I think homeschoolers, there's two trains of thoughts I think with homeschoolers of the like either I'm the dumbest person in the room
Mm,
because like I know that my education is lacking, or I feel super smart and I've been kind of convinced that my education is so superior to like a public school scenario where you're like, well, you guys
yeah.
are just dumb. I'm the smart one in the room. I
Yeah. Which one did you
and
feel like?
oh man, that's a tough one. I in some areas I felt smarter than other people. In other
Uh-huh.
areas I was like, I'm stupid as all
Okay.
as all can be. Science is not
I
my
can relate.
area, but when it
Yeah.
came to things like history, my parents really leaned into finding the things we were passionate about and really
Mm,
pushing us to research those areas. So like
okay.
for history, I was really into World War history,
Hmm.
Revolutionary War, just wars in general. I think that's
Okay.
kind of maybe a boy thing too, of just
Sure.
like, yeah, guns and
Sure.
swords and
Sure.
all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I leaned heavily into that stuff where I was like, I was pretty knowledgeable of that and I could talk anybody's ear off about it. And then I loved music, and so I was just really into the music industry. That's what I wanted to pursue as a career, anyways. And thankfully, I had parents who were like, "Yeah, you can listen to some rock music, and you can,
Okay.
dabble
Yeah.
in some other genres other than Christian rock."
Uh-huh.
But
Uh-huh.
but I could talk anybody's ear off about that stuff. But then it comes to science. I have a buddy who he works for like NASA and some of the he builds rockets and stuff. He's a rocket scientist now.
Yeah.
That dude would not shut up about science, and he
Yeah.
was just a genius at it. And I was like, he made me feel like an idiot when we
Yeah.
would chat.
Yeah.
So I sit in both camps where I'm like, some areas I'm like, yeah, I'm definitely superior in my knowledge about this than anybody else in the room, but other areas I was like, no, I'm just dumb when
Yeah.
it comes
I
to it.
think I probably felt the same. I felt like certainly when it came to the Bible, I probably knew more than you did. Um,
Yeah.
but and maybe um yeah, maybe certain elements of history. I was a good reader. I enjoyed
Mhm.
reading. And so, and I think I learned to read fairly early on, and I was just a voracious reader. So that I think helped. I felt at least equal to my public school and private school friends when it came to like English.
Yeah.
Um, but like you, when it came to math and science, you know, I it was tough. And my best friend, I think one of the saving graces in my life is that my best friend who lived two houses down, um, he his mom was a public school teacher and his dad was a college professor.
Okay.
And he was brilliant and very studious. And so I both like had a good like measure of like where I stacked up,
Right.
and I was always below him. He's gone on to like he got his PhD. He became a scientist. He studies like monkeys in Costa Rica now, or something really
Okay.
cool like that. I also had like his parents, I think were a little bit worried about me because they, and they cared about me and they loved me and they wanted me to have a fuller, I think, cultural and academic experience than I was getting. And they found ways for me to get that when I would go over, and I loved going over. They took me on trips,
Mhm.
like their summer family vacations, which were very educational for me. They let me watch TV when I was at their house, play video games. There was access to like just like stuff I would not have at home,
Yeah.
and it really kind of expanded my mind and my heart in ways that I'm really grateful for, like looking back, you know. Um, so yeah, shout out to Miss Vicky and Guillermo Campos. Y'all really saved my life in a lot of ways, I think.
It's always great to have people like that in your life. I had like we called them my adopted grandparents. They were like my church grandparents, if you will, because all my other grandparents lived a little too far away. But
Mm.
Tom Romanet, man, he saw that I loved guitar, and he was like, "Dude, I'm gonna introduce you to to Eric Clapton and BB King and
Oh,
like
that's
all
great.
these things." And like he was just like, he would push me to be like, "You could play like this. You could,
Yeah, yeah,
Um, and I think kids in particular, I think need people like that in their lives that they see the value and they see like what you're passionate about, and they just push you to like go for it, like just do it, go all in on it,
yeah,
have
yeah.
fun with it, enjoy it.
No,
It's just
absolutely.
key.
Like I love sports,
Yeah,
and my family is not a sports family at all. And being homeschooled, it was very unlikely that I was going to encounter sports
yeah,
opportunities. But Fernando's dad, Guillermo, he started coaching Fernando in basketball in the YMCA and asked me if I wanted to join. And he would play every evening. He would practice with me and Fernando. They had a hoop above their garage, and he taught me how to play basketball, and I fell absolutely in love with it. And
yeah,
it became like, a big part of my identity.
yeah,
And um, and it changed my life, to
yeah.
have that. And I probably never would have gotten that into it if it hadn't been, for him. And so yeah, so you're absolutely right. So like having those people, um, whether you're homeschooled or not, just having other adults that care about you is really important. And not to say, like, I had a wonderful extended family that did care about me a lot, but I was an odd little kid, and I had interests that were different from a lot of the rest of my family, and so I'm grateful that I just had an outlet for that,
Yeah,
So
yeah. I think there's something about having like an exterior, like your family is supposed to love and support you no
right,
matter what. That's
right,
in a perfect world, we'll say that.
yeah,
But having that outside kind of person, mentor, picture, whatever, it's incredible. I've had a cute few of those in my life, and they're just always like the best people,
yeah,
and they come and go. That's
yeah.
just life. But
The other thing they
yeah,
did is they were native Spanish speakers, and so they
nice.
wanted me to learn Spanish. And so when I would come over to the house, Guillermo would only talk to me in Spanish, and he would force me to
Okay.
try and figure it out.
Yeah.
And it helped me learn some
Yeah.
Spanish, which is very valuable. Living in San Antonio, I should have been being taught Spanish anyway.
I feel that. Growing up in California, same deal. It's like everybody speaks Spanish. I'm also, no one believes this. I'm a quarter Hispanic. So I'm like, I really had no reason to not
To
learn
not
it.
learn it, right? Yeah, and I'm ashamed. Even though like I had that, I still should know a lot more than I do.
Yeah.
But I am grateful for that like whole like kind of cultural window that I just again would not have had, because I
Yeah.
wasn't in school. Had I gone to public school in San Antonio, I would have had a lot of Latino friends. I would have been around a lot of Spanish speakers. But where we were kind of a little bit isolated on the outskirts of town, I didn't, and so that was
Yeah.
it for me. So
I want to shift gears just a little bit. I kind of want to jump forward just slightly.
sure.
So high school and going into like college years, and like what did that look like for you? Because for me, I definitely there was a lot more. I don't want to say legitimacy to like homeschooling, but like it wasn't really an issue for me to get to college. I
Mm.
had transcript. I had, you know, I was decent at enough stuff that I was like I could get into a couple places. So, but what did that look like for you? Obviously, I know you we've already talked about your homeschool experience kind of evolved and it got more solidified. But like when you were gearing up for kind of that launch, I guess let's just say the adulthood launch, like what were you thinking about? What was going through your brain of like, what's the next step here?
Yeah, I wasn't sure. I had a few false starts. I I wanted to be a Christian rock star. That's what I wanted to be. And so I was in a few different bands in high school, which I do talk about on the album a little
Yeah,
bit. I
you've
have a
got a
joke
great bit
about that.
about the rock band,
Yeah.
the Christian rock band.
And so I was hoping that would take off and, we would tour or something. College was not really on my mind.
Yeah.
Neither one of my parents went to college. And um, I had one grandfather that went to college, and I don't think the rest of my family. I had a couple of cousins that went, but college just was not. I know for some kids it's kind of the expected thing.
Right.
Um, wasn't really for
Yeah.
me, and my parents didn't really push it. They never discouraged it. They didn't push it, and I think they just didn't know, even how you would go about that. Probably, I don't know. So the Christian rock band thing didn't work out. When I graduated high school, I was working at a Christian bookstore in San Antonio in their music department, and I was enjoying that, and for the most part, and I'd kind of gone through a crisis of faith during my teenage years too. So I had stopped going to church, but I still had most of my friends and stuff were people I had met at church. So I still kind of had the connection, and I wasn't like antagonistic. I wasn't anti-church or anti-Christian. I just realized like I don't think I really believe this, or at least not in the same way. And so I'd stopped going to church, and um, I decided at some point, and I'm not even sure why, that I wanted to go to community college and just kind of try it out. And I lasted like less than a semester, and I was like, I don't think I want to be in school. And I actually had a little. I did go my junior year of high school. I went for a semester to a private Christian school in San
Okay.
Antonio because I wanted to play on their basketball team. And
Okay.
they had like a nationally ranked basket. They were very, very good, and I wanted to play. And I went, and my parents agreed to it. And I hated being in school. As much as I wanted the like social part of it, I was like,
Yeah.
wow, we're wasting a lot of time. And a lot of these kids are really dumb and they don't want to be here. And they're just making everything harder and making everything take longer. I was like, I could normally get my schoolwork done in like 2 or 3 hours, right? And
Right.
then have the rest of the day to do whatever I wanted. And
Yeah.
now I'm locked in this place for 8 hours a day. Most of it feels like wasted time to me because I could get all this stuff done if y'all would just get out of my way and just give me the work. I'll just do it.
Yeah.
Um, and so I decided it just wasn't worth it. And so I also butted heads with the administration at that school because they were very, very fundamentalist, very, very strict. And I tend to like to push buttons a little bit, push boundaries a little bit.
Yeah.
And not even like, I just remember one chap when I was in chapel, and the it was the vice principal was preaching in chapel, and he started talking negatively about Jars of Clay, the band.
Ooh. Yeah.
And he was talking negatively because they had decided to go on tour with Sting.
Yeah.
Yes, I
And
remember. Yep.
he felt like they had no bit, they were basically, by doing that, they were endorsing Sting and what Sting was about, and that they,
Mhm.
if they're Christians, they shouldn't be playing in those kinds of venues and environments. And I actually raised my hand in chapel, which you don't do. Like, you did, it's not a Q&A, but I was like, I raised my hand and he actually stopped and he asked what and I was like, doesn't it make, isn't that where you would want Christians to be, is like in front of non-Christians where they get a chance to like hear this, the message and this
Absolutely.
other
Yeah.
perspective and stuff. And anyway, it kind of became this thing in the middle of chapel between, and then I got called to the office afterwards, and he was upset that I was disruptive and being rebellious. And so that was the other piece where I was like, yeah, I don't think I want to deal with this. So
Yeah.
I'll, if I'm gonna butt heads with you know, a cranky fundamentalist, I'll butt heads with my mom or my dad, you know. I have to do it
Yeah.
anyway. So
Yeah.
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 It's so funny that you bring up Jars of Clay because I went to the same college that they went to. Granted,
Oh,
my time was way later. So Greenville College, it's now Greenville University in Greenville, Illinois. It's where Jars of Clay formed.
yeah.
They only lasted, I think, a semester to 1 year before they dropped out to do the band full time and
Okay.
moved to Nashville.
Okay.
And so, anyway, so that's a big, rich history of that school of like, we learn pretty much everything there is to know about Jars of Clay.
Yeah.
The lead singer spoke at like my graduation
Oh,
and stuff like
wow.
that. Like they bring them back for anything and everything. But they're a great band. They were a
Sure.
huge band for me growing up too. Just like I loved their music was very influential.
Yeah.
So it's funny
Well,
that
I
you
was
bring them up.
excited. You know, when I was 16, I was excited because they were starting to have some crossover success. And
Yes,
like they were getting played. I would just hear them on. By this time, I was listening to secular radio because I had gotten my own car and I
right.
could drive and I could listen to whatever I want. I could buy whatever CD. This was when CDs were a thing, and I had my whole like, you know, book of CDs and my, you know, and I could listen to whatever I wanted. So I was just excited that, oh, this band's like, you know, making it. And yeah, so they were influential. So is Greenville, is it like a small, like a Christian college?
Very small Christian
Okay.
college. It's like 1,000-ish students. It's
Yeah.
right over the border from St. Louis, Missouri, so it's about 45 minutes to an hour,
Okay.
depending how the wind travels. But yeah, very small school. Very, it's a free Methodist uh, school, and but huge music program. Like very, it's a very interesting thing. Like the history of it and like the people who have come out of there. Jars of Clay obviously being a big one. One of the founders of In-N-Out Burger is like
Hmm.
from there from way back. It used to be a women's college. Anyway, there's a huge history there
Yeah.
of stuff, but and it's not super far from Nashville, so a lot of people they have a great music business program and music program and stuff like that. So that's why I went there. I wanted
Yeah.
to initially do audio engineering, got into the music business side of things, was like I'm going to manage bands and stuff. And to your point about Jars of Clay being like on tour with Sting and kind of that like salt of the earth, like let's go be a light in the dark places, right? It was always funny to me how my relatives and my friends back home they would always ask me like what band do you want to work with? And at the time, this was before everyone knew that Kanye was a Nazi, but I wanted to work for Kanye West, and
Really?
I was yeah, I did, and I was like, I think it'd be really interesting to work in the rap industry, and I had a huge list of like all these secular artists that I wanted to
Yeah.
work with, and I just was
Yeah.
like, I think it would be so much fun to go see that side of the world and really like push myself to be out there.
Yeah.
And people would be like, no, like you should go like work for like the Newsboys or Jars of Clay
Right.
or
Right.
Switchfoot or
Right.
like any of the Christian bands. And I'm like, but they're all Christians already. Like
Yeah.
I wanted that push to be like something bigger than that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I just think it's kind of that was an interesting point you brought up. I was like, I
Yeah.
resonate with this
Yeah. And I
pretty
will
strongly.
say, you know, I had that same feeling of like I didn't want to be in a Christian bubble anymore.
Okay.
And I was interested in Jars of Clay, but I also, part of me, I was not a huge fan of Jars of Clay because they felt a little too safe and mainstream. And this is when I had started to discover like um kind of the Christian indie alternative scene. You know, this is when like Tooth and Nail Records started putting out bands, and like started to discover like there's like a punk scene and a, you know, like a very kind of experimental art rock scene. And there's these music festivals that have like Cornerstone Music Festival in Illinois
Right.
that I went out to a couple of years, and I was like, it felt a little more, you know, a little more worldly, a little edgier than what you would hear on you know, Christian radio.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to defend what Jars of Clay was doing in theory, but there was also a part of me that was like, it still felt too safe, you know, and which is
Yeah.
why I think eventually when I decided to go to college, I never really considered going to like a Christian college. Um,
Hmm.
I'm, that's probably where my parents would have wanted me to go if I were, um,
Yeah.
you know, that's where most of my homeschool friends that were going to college, they were going to private Christian colleges. But
Yeah.
by that point, I was like, man, I really want to experience more of the world and just have a broader experience. And so I dropped out of community college, took a year off. I was just working, and wasn't sure what I was going to do with my life. And then I got really into kind of through uh, Christian apologetics. I got into philosophy and just reading
Okay.
philosophy. And then I got into, I have a brother, my older brother had left the church, and he was considered himself a kind of like rationalist skeptic, and started like getting me to read like Richard Dawkins and kind of these new atheist types.
Mhm.
And so I started reading some of their stuff, and I got really interested in philosophy and science and trying to like integrate it with my faith. And like,
Right.
and so I read a book about I don't know if you're familiar with the intelligent design movement, but it was kind of like, it's a type of creationism,
Okay.
but it's not like young earth creationism. It doesn't take the Bible as a starting point, but it does, they do argue that like there is clear kind of evidence of intelligent design in biology.
Okay.
And there's a lot of like serious scientists that were a part of this. And one of them wrote a book that I read, and I emailed him. And I was probably 17 at the time, and either had not graduated yet or just graduated. I just emailed him and say, I really enjoyed your book. This is fascinating. I'd really be interested in like learning more. And he immediately wrote me back. And this is, we had just gotten a computer, so like email was kind of new. um,
Yeah.
and he was like, I want to connect you with some other people in this movement. And he made me a part of this like email list. And all of a sudden, I was in this email listserv with all of these like scientists and philosophers around the world who were talking about this intelligent design stuff. And I was like, oh my God, this is fascinating. And this is something I could see myself like really throwing myself into. And so
Yeah.
it got me excited about learning and going to school, because then I had in my head that like, oh, okay, I'm going to either become a scientist or a philosophy professor, and I'm going to like be a part of this like movement. And so that's when I got serious about like, okay, I want to find a good university with like good, you know, science and philosophy program. And so that's how I ended up going to the University of Texas
Okay.
in Austin, which is a massive school, like
Yes.
55,000 students.
Yeah.
Huge shift for me, like, because I had never been to a public school at all, and this is a public
Right.
university, and certainly never been to anything this large. And so it was a big shock, but I loved it. Like I loved the
Hmm.
challenge of it. I think homeschooling kind of put a little bit of a chip on my shoulder because I felt like I always had to prove myself that I wasn't stupid.
Yeah.
And I wasn't stupid, I was just uneducated, right?
Right.
Like there's a difference. I wasn't stupid, I
Yeah.
was just ignorant, right? Because I
Yeah.
just hadn't been exposed to stuff. I just hadn't had the opportunities. And then once I had something that I was excited about learning, I really threw myself into it. And yeah, so I but applying to college, I do remember as a homeschooler, it wasn't clear how you do it. Um, and I think that's why starting at the community college kind of helped because it was just more accessible. We went into the office and I remember they were like, well, he's going to have to take like a placement test and just to see where he's at academically because I did have a transcript. My mom wrote my transcript. We wrote it together. Um, and we really winged it because we didn't
Yeah.
really remember everything that I had learned,
Yeah.
and grading was like pretty loose.
Yeah.
So we basically made up a transcript for me, and I have a joke about it on the album. It is, if your mom writes your transcript, you end up doing pretty good, right? So
Yeah.
we turned that in, and they're like, okay, thank you for the transcript. We'll be sure not to set it down on anything wet since it's written on a napkin, but um, you're gonna have to take this test. And so I took some kind of test. I wrote an essay for them, and I guess it was good enough that they were like, all right, we'll let you into community college. And and then when I applied to real college, I don't know, it's community college is real college, but when I applied to a 4-year school, um, I think that's when I had to take like the SAT or,
Yeah.
or one of those like standardized tests. And at that point, I do remember I did have the sense that colleges were actually really interested in homeschool students at that point. And because I guess enough had gone to college and proven themselves that it was like, oh, some of these kids are really pretty smart, and so I would say they rolled out the red carpet for me, but they did facilitate my applying, and it was fairly straightforward, and it was great. Um,
Yeah.
and I'm really glad that I got to have that experience. But I did once I got there. That's when the gaps in my education really, I think, showed up. You know,
Okay.
and I
Yeah.
did feel like I had to work twice as hard.
You brought up like them kind of not necessarily rolling out the red carpet, but having colleges starting to have an interest in homeschool students.
Yeah.
And what I got told when I was headed to college was this: there was enough evidence that showed that homeschool students thrived in the college experience because they already kind of knew how to like individually like operate. They didn't
Yes.
need like a classroom setting. And so when it
Right.
came to like, hey, professors are going to hand you just like a ton of work. You have to just be able to do it and
Hmm.
have nobody looking over your shoulder demanding you do it.
Yeah.
And that, homeschool students, I think, tend to lean a little bit more towards, yeah, that's a possibility, especially in your case. Your mom is raising 3 kids,
Yeah.
and homeschooling them. My mom was raising 2. I have friends who their homeschool family is 12 kids. It's like
Right.
insane.
Right.
um and so there is this kind of like you have to have the drive to like do it on your own. And so I think that was like a really, I don't know, it was just an interesting moment that I think back on, and I'm like, huh, they wanted me partly because of that. And then once I got there, I lied to everybody. I just said I went to private school.
Oh, did
I
you?
was like,
Okay.
yeah, I
Yeah.
was like,
Yeah.
I told everybody I went to private school. I wanted no one to know I was homeschooled. I told a few of the people who became my better friends. And then it eventually came out and I was less scared about it. But I think I just wanted that, like, I don't want this marker
Yeah.
on myself. And I also
Yeah.
I wanted to work in the music industry. I was like, cool people work in the music industry. Like I was like, I'm not a cool person.
Yeah.
And so it was definitely it's an interesting thing to be like homeschool. But to your
Yeah.
point too, it's like the gaps show up where you go, ooh, yeah, I don't know this all that
Right.
well.
Yeah.
So I got to go figure it out.
Yeah. But I felt like I I didn't mind telling people I was homeschooled. There was a part of me that liked it. I like to like be like, yeah, I'm homeschooled and I'm here and I'm smart and we're out here, right?
Yeah.
We're not all a bunch of weird freaks, you know. Um uh so I think I liked it, and like I said, it kind of gave me a little chip on my shoulder that I think helped me
Yeah.
succeed in school, because I did want to prove that, homeschoolers can, we're just as smart as anybody else, if you give us the opportunity to learn, so
Exactly.
um yeah, so I actually I embraced the identity um pretty strongly, but the gaps showed up and I was like, that's when I really started to feel like, realize what I missed out on as a
Mhm.
homeschooler, and how, just given the way I was wired and what my interests were, um, and I probably would have benefited quite a bit from a, structured school situation with college, as a target and a goal. If I had been like prepared for college, like I just like in a college prep situation, I think I really would have thrived, and benefited from that,
Yeah.
because it made it a struggle in college. But
Yeah.
we do. I'm sure I learned a lot in the struggle, too. Um,
Yeah.
so
It's hard to sometimes look back on it and be like, of course there's things we would always change, right? About like, I wish this was different. I wish that was different. And the point of the show is it's also to kind of like, it's like, well, we made it through. We're two successful guys. Granted, we're white. We got that working for us, um
absolutely, yeah,
but we're two we've made it out. We're successful. We're still here. We're standing, and it's like,
right,
okay, we
right,
if we can do it, you can do it too, and
yeah.
so I do want to get to a little bit of like, when does comedy enter the scene for you, of like, maybe it's not starting to do stand up, but where did that, have you always been a funny guy? Like, is that, or where did that really come from?
I think I started using humor, sarcasm in particular, as a like defense mechanism pretty early on as a
Okay.
teenager. And um, I remember when I was 16, my friends, had my church friends had an intervention with me, a sarcasm intervention, where they literally sat me down and were like, dude, we love you, but like, you're too sarcastic too much of the time. Like, you've got to dial it back. It's just too much. And that was kind of a wake up call for me. That I was just really just leaning into it. It was just a way of like, I think, protecting myself probably. And so I know that that's been a part of me for a long time. Um, but, and I enjoyed stand up. Um, but I wasn't really into it until much later in life. So like, I think I started really paying attention to it, in my like early 30s. And then, because I was just going through a hard time personally, and comedy was just like a nice, uh, relief and distraction.
Yeah.
And then I started when I was 35. So I was just pretty old to start a career in comedy. Most of the people that I know that I started with were like, um, early 20s. Some of them were still teenagers. They were in high school doing
Right.
comedy. And so I was, from the beginning, kind of the old man in the local comedy scene, you know. But I just kind of fell in love with the art form. And I am the type of person, when I get into something, I really get into it, like I
Okay.
really throw
Yeah.
myself into it. And it happened to be at just a time of my life where, um, my marriage had broken up, and we were sharing custody of our kids. And so I would have my kids for a week, and then they would be with their mom for a week. And so all of a sudden I had these huge vacuums of time. And so comedy was a way. I was looking for ways to fill my time and find a like creative outlet. And something about comedy also felt kind of therapeutic. And so um, I had been a preacher. So
Okay.
after college, I um, still thought I was going to be a philosophy professor. I started a PhD program in philosophy, realized it's not what I wanted. I ended up dropping out and going to seminary instead.
Okay.
And then after seminary, um, I never worked for a church. I worked for a couple of different nonprofits, but I did regularly preach in the congregations that we were a part of. So preaching was like a regular part of my life. And at the time of the divorce, I was kind of going through kind of a spiritual shift too, and had stopped preaching. And comedy was like, uh, it was kind of a lateral move in a way. It's very similar.
Yeah.
I was used to talking to people, and I was used to the writing process. And in my kind of preaching, I tended to lean towards, being like, I leaned on humor, and I was fairly provocative, and, wanted to like get a reaction out of people,
Right.
which is what you do with comedy. And actually, the first stand-up set I ever did, this was before I really got serious about it. I was still preaching, and I was a part of a Mennonite church in San Antonio. And the Sunday after Easter, every year in the Mennonite church, they have this tradition of Humor Sunday. And it's an old tradition that goes way back. There's a few other denominations that do it. But the idea is that this is Easter was the greatest trick that God ever pulled on the devil, right? And so the Sunday after Easter, you celebrate that by like having this service that's devoted to humor. And so people would do skits, some people would sing silly songs. Um, I chose to do a 5-minute stand up set making fun of Mennonites, and it crushed. Like it killed. Like
Yeah.
it was so good. And I had so much fun doing it. And that was 2 or 3 years before I actually went and tried stand up, really. And but I think that's probably what put the bug in me. And there must have been something
Right.
in me that what made me want to try it in the first place. But yeah, that's my first taste of it. And it stuck with me. And so when I started doing it kind of, and I say seriously, when I first started, I was just going to open mics just for fun. Like I said, I
Mhm.
was trying to meet people. I was filling my time. I was looking for a creative outlet. And I just found that I enjoyed the challenge of it. When it's good, when you're making people laugh, there's nothing like it. It feels great.
Yeah.
Um, when it doesn't go well and you're bombing, there's nothing like it. Like the pain of it,
Right.
the embarrassment, the humiliation, there's nothing like it. And so the
Yeah.
highs are really high and the lows are really low, and I just got addicted to it,
Yeah. I was gonna
and
say because I look at stand up comedy as like, you know, I work in a creative field. I work with podcasters, but like I wanted to work with musicians and stuff like that. But so I have always been drawn to the creative aspect of stuff. And what I think is so interesting is comedy is really the only, I would argue, the only creative one that like you get instant feedback. Like you
right.
just said, right? Like if
Yeah.
your joke is hilarious, you will know instantaneously. You write a song, it's going to take you 6 months to a year to really flesh out whether the audience likes this song or not.
Yeah.
Like there is something to the live performance where yeah, you can kind of feel it, but you have to put it in front of a bunch of audiences. But yeah, with comedy, like pretty quickly like this is really bad
Yeah,
or this is really good. And
sure.
so,
Yep.
and you learn how to read people too, where, I'm sure that an audience in Texas versus an audience in North Carolina or here in
Yeah,
Tennessee or California,
absolutely.
they got to be very different,
Yeah, yeah. Which is part of the fun of it.
Mhm.
Is part of the learning how to read different audiences. And but to your point about, yeah, the instant gratification, I think that was part of what was attractive to me.
Yeah.
Is I could have an idea that day and go up that evening to an open mic and try it out and immediately get some feedback on it. But the other thing about comedy that's different, I think, from a lot of other art forms is that you can't you can't practice it in private. You can't
Mhm.
do comedy in your room. You have to go on stage. You have to
Right.
do it. It's not like guitar or whatever where you can sit in your room and learn the chords. Like, you don't know if you're playing it right until you're in front of an audience and they tell you that you're playing it right, So
Exactly.
you just got to keep getting up, which means you have to be bad in front of people, usually for a long time
Yeah.
before you get good. So it takes a certain kind of, I think, mental illness probably to subject yourself to that for long enough to get good. It
Yeah.
is a weird, like almost addiction that I think you have to have, because most people that start, a lot of people start stand up, they try it and then they quit for a number of reasons. And there are so many good reasons to quit. And,
Yeah.
and the ones that stick with it, for whatever reason, I think there is something wrong with us for sure. I'm not sure what, but as a group, there is something
Yeah.
wrong. It is a kind of, masochism, to
Yeah.
keep putting yourself in that situation. Because I remember the first time I bombed. The first time I did it, I did okay. The second time, I did really bad, and it hurt. And I remember it kind of made me mad at myself because I was like, why didn't it work this time? And I
Yeah.
was like, I'm gonna figure this out. I'm gonna
Mm.
like I'm gonna go back home and I'm gonna like rewrite some stuff and I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna try it again until I figure out how to get this to work.
I remember I watched this documentary at one point, and I want to attribute it to the right person. I don't think I'm going to, but they were interviewing like Jerry Seinfeld and Dave Chappelle and some of the greats, some of the biggest stand-up comics of all time, and they were talking about like the New York circuit because
Hmm.
that was the thing, and they would
Yeah.
talk about one of them was talking about how they would go do sets at like six different clubs in one night, and it was just like
Oh
this
yeah.
hour I'm here, that
Yep.
and they'd move, and one of them was saying how he's like, and I would change one word per joke per spot to see what landed the best with audiences, and that's how I would practice my jokes. And I was like, that is such an interesting concept, because again, to go back to that concept of like that thought process of like the instantaneous like reaction and knowing
Yeah.
this is what lands. Well, you sub out this word for that, or it might be a timing issue or whatever.
Hmm.
You can practice all of that within the span of, they're out for 6 hours a night, whatever, you know, practice all of that. And then the next week when you have your next sets, you're like, we're back at it. And
Yeah.
now that joke is much more refined. And I think that's such an interesting, it's such an interesting thing, because I've worked with enough musicians where we look at similar things within the music, right? Of like a pause in a song, or like when the drums come in, or
Hmm.
all of these different things that evoke a certain emotion, which comedy is it's emotional, right? It's meant
Yeah.
to make you think and make you feel something, and music is the same way. And so you look at it and you go, okay, like I've been sent so many albums that I'm just like, I'll sit there and I'll listen and I'll listen and I'll listen, and I'm like, there's something missing. What is
Hmm.
missing? And it's like, it might be a word, it might be like a freaking triangle, it might just be
Yeah.
like this little tweak that we make, and it's like, okay, that's it, that's the hit,
Yeah.
that's the single.
Yep.
um and so I think it's an interesting, I don't know, I love that kind of stuff,
Yeah. No, it's a
on the back
puzzle.
end for me.
It's a total,
Mhm.
that's the fun of it, is the puzzle, is trying to figure it out. Like, how do you fit it together just right? Which pieces are missing, which pieces are in the wrong place? And Yeah, absolutely. And that's, the thing is, you never feel like, I'm sure it's the same with a song. I never feel like a joke is done. Like even all these,
Mhm.
the jokes that are on my album, some of those jokes I wrote my like third year into comedy. So I've been doing them like 7 years now. I'm about 10 years in. And, and they're still, even after I recorded them, I was like, oh, you know what? I think there's a better way to do that. Or I thought of a new tag for that joke that I've been doing for 7 years, because it just
Right.
feels like it's never done. It's always growing and changing. And so that's what keeps it interesting to me, and keeps
Yeah.
me excited about it. Even when there's no success, because it is a very hard business, just like music. Very few people that do it are able to make a living at it. And
Yeah.
those that are, it's a hard living. It
Hmm.
sounds fun and like, um, you know, exciting, but most of it's not. Most of the day-to-day stuff of a musician or a comedian, it's not the fun part. The being on
Yeah.
stage is the smallest part of it, you know.
Yeah.
It's all the other stuff, the travel,
Yeah.
and which is really hard, especially if you have a family, and it's just the logistics of getting places and stuff. It's exhausting and it's hard on relationships. So yeah.
You nailed it. It's definitely it's a challenge, and it's such an I don't know. It's a great creative outlet, like you said, and I think it's so cool when people can make it and they can make it work. And like, but yeah, the number of times like now understanding the peek behind the curtain
Yeah.
of like seeing how the industry works, it's such a I have so much more like appreciation for like when I go to a smaller comedy show
Mhm.
or even a larger one, like going up to the opener after the fact and just being like, yo, I loved this bit that you did, right? And like just
Oh man,
attempting
I'm
to
so
try to
glad you
be
do that.
positive because it's like
That's
uh,
huge. That's so
you
huge.
you don't know how much work went into all of
Yeah.
this to get them here where they are today, right? And so
Yeah.
it's like, if I can say one nice thing about them, it might make their whole day.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because if they're like 99% of comedians, they get off stage and all they can think about is where they messed up.
Mhm. Yeah,
Or that spot where people didn't laugh or didn't laugh
yeah,
hard enough.
right.
So getting that kind of feedback, yeah, it really can make their whole night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell people. So the album is called Almost a Grown Man. It's
Uh-huh.
coming out the 25th of April. This episode I think is gonna drop after that, so it'll be
Okay.
live.
Yeah.
Where what's the best place for people to go? Like connect with you, find it, buy it, stream it, whatever. Find shows.
Yeah. Well, so you can go to my website, jeremyalder.com, and that's where you'll be able to find links to the album, to previous special that I've done, and all my upcoming dates. The album will be streaming on all the major platforms. You'll be able to find it on Spotify and Apple Music or wherever you stream music. It'll be there. And so yeah, shouldn't be too hard to find.
Cool. And that's all going to be linked down in the description as well. So go give Jeremy a follow and see what's up there. Give it a listen. I've listened to it. It's a great album. I got a sneak preview, so thank you for that.
Yeah.
I
Thanks
think
for
my
listening.
favorite, of course, yeah. I think my favorite joke has to be you have a joke about purity rings and how you didn't wear one. I
Right.
don't want to butcher it. Like if you want to tell it,
Yeah, right. So that one's about, so like a lot of my friends in youth group wore purity rings, and uh but I didn't because I didn't have to because I was homeschooled, and that would be redundant, right? That I'm not having relations. Um but I also realized that the pair of corduroy pants that my mom sewn for me sent the same message as a purity ring. So I didn't need to wear a ring because pretty much any belt can be a chastity belt if you're wearing your purity pants is the joke. So yeah. True
Yeah,
story.
that would hit with me so hard. Yeah, I was that was gonna be my question after it was like, is this based on a true story
We
that
got
your mom
really
was
into sewing our own clothes. And
okay?
so my mom made some. I also made some of my own clothes. Yeah, which
Yeah,
I unfortunately don't have anymore. But because I would love to um, be able to share those with the world. But yeah, no, that's true. We were making our own. We were making our own clothes. Yep, we were
yeah,
one of those homeschool families.
yeah. I mean, hey, it to each their own. I won't say that I necessarily made my own clothes. I do know a lot of the girls in my group growing up. They would also make their own bathing suits during the summer.
Oh wow.
Again, like you, we grew up in very purity culture
Yeah.
esque environment, and so they didn't feel like they could find something at the store that was modest
Sure.
enough.
Yep.
So that
Yep.
was always an interesting experience to kind of go over and be like, so what are you guys making? But I didn't need it either. I was also a theater kid, so I mean, I've worn
Oh
tights
wow.
and wigs and
Okay.
all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
So yeah, I to your point, I didn't need to wear a ring either because they could just smell. I just oozed homeschooler. So okay, I want to, as we kind of wrap up here, I want to kind of look back a little bit and ask you some questions about as you've kind of homeschooling is definitely a part of your identity still, which is awesome. It's something, it took me a while to get there where I was like comfortable expressing that part of me. But
Mm.
is there what like what aspects of the homeschool experience do you think you appreciate the most looking back on it?
I think the independence and the freedom that I had to kind of shape my days was huge. Um, and, and that was the biggest adjustment for me when I dipped my foot back into school.
Mhm.
Um, is just, you know, not having the freedom to decide what to do with my time. So I think that's probably the biggest. I think also I do appreciate, I always felt a little bit like an outsider. And I think that helped me recognize other people who felt like outsiders and connect with other people who felt like outsiders. And I appreciate having that perspective.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for that. Even though like my views now, my beliefs are very different than what they were when I was being homeschooled. I do feel like I have a kind of critical lens on mainstream culture that came from being homeschooled and not just taking things for granted, you know, basic assumptions that you would have if you grew up kind of in the mainstream. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you 100%.
hmm.
That's like yeah. I'm not even going to add to it cuz that's I think you nailed it right on the head. I did also want to ask you this too because you are a parent. You're a parent of 4 kids. And so when you look at their like education now and I don't know if your kids are homeschooled or not, but like has that run through your brain of like how is that factored into your decision to raise your kids as they are today and like their education?
so my kids are all in public school. Two of them have graduated.
Yeah.
Um, we briefly tried homeschooling when they were very little, and that lasted about a year, and it just felt like too overwhelming for us.
Hmm.
And I think for them, I could tell we just were not able to give them what we felt like they needed. And part of it was just like, you have four very young kids, all with different. I think the oldest at the time was maybe in fourth or fifth grade, and then we would have had like a third grader and a kindergartner and a baby. And so like trying to juggle all of that, I was like, man, it gave me so much more appreciation for my mom. So I was
Yeah.
like, I don't know how she did it. We need a break in order to be who we want to be for our kids and for each other. We can't be with them all 24/7.
Yeah.
And so that was short-lived, and they've gone to public school, and they've thrived and done well. And I've also become a very strong believer in an advocate for public education. I think it's important and necessary and valuable that we have universally available, solid, good education for kids. Not every kid can be homeschooled. In fact, most can't. Most families in America don't have the resources to homeschool their kids, the financial resources for one. To have one parent be able to stay at home is very, very hard now.
Yes.
And so just financially, it's a huge barrier for people. Even if they wanted to homeschool, they can't. And also, to be honest, most people are not qualified to homeschool their kids. They're just not. Your mom had a background in education, which is great. Most parents don't. Mine did not. I love my mom and my dad. They did the best they could. They had no business trying to be a
Yeah.
school for us. They had no business doing that. And because
Yeah.
they couldn't. And so I think, I came to realize that, and I came to really, growing up, public schools were like always painted negatively for me, and they were seen as like a threat, a spiritual threat, a political threat, a cultural threat. It was all bad. And I came to learn that wasn't the case. I went to college. While I was in college, I started working as a substitute teacher in the public school system. And I was like, man, these are just regular people. And these are just regular kids. And this is the most accessible education option for the vast majority of people. And we want people educated, right?
Yeah.
So let's stop crapping all over public schools, and let's give them the resources they need to provide a good, solid education for the people that want it. So yeah. And so I felt like also a little bit of like, I'm going to send my kids to public school, and if I've got a problem with the school, I'm going to now be invested in it to help make it better for my own kids, and
Yeah.
therefore for the other kids in my community who I now realize like I'm responsible for.
Yeah.
And we are truly in this life together. And we are, we are one body. And when one of us suffers, we all suffer. And so I really do believe there is such a thing as the common good. And I feel like public education can serve the common good, and I want to support it. And I wanted my kids to be a part of it. So all that to say, I realize there are people for whom, particularly I think kids, neuroatypical kids can really benefit from homeschooling because a lot of schools are not set up to help with them. There's lots of kids, I've heard stories from parents whose kids were just bullied in school. And not just public school. Private school has a huge bullying problem too. Has all of the same problems as public schools and some worse. And so in that case, like, homeschooling can really make a lot of sense. I get that. But I think in general, I want people in public school learning how to live together.
Yeah.
How to be together, how to learn together, how to create community together. And because that's one of the things I think I did miss being homeschooled is the socialization process. Socializing into a multicultural, country. And, being so isolated, I just didn't know how to interact with people that don't share my same beliefs or outlook on life, or have a very radically different experience growing up. I was sheltered from all of that, and so then I had to learn it on the on the fly much later, without the like social skills that I probably should have developed earlier on. And so I didn't want my kids to experience that. I wanted them to have the full life experience. And if there were corrections that needed to be made about or influences I didn't like in public school, those could be dealt with at home. You know.
I 100%. I'm with you. I agree with you. I think the biggest thing I'm an advocate for is parents being involved in their kids'
Yes.
education,
Yeah.
and recognizing the strengths, the weaknesses, what works best for your kid, and pushing them to be the best version and giving them the tools they need. And to your point, your kids are in public school, but when you see things in the public school system that you don't agree with, being able to address that and not just be angry, but be like, how do we make this better?
Right.
And I think that's what we're missing a lot of in this country. And to your point, I think also being able to have that socialization and know we're growing up in a multitude of cultures inside of the U.S. You just go between states, you go between towns. There's a multitude of different cultures and belief systems that happen. And we got to figure out a way to come together and work together. And, sometimes we got to set differences aside. Sometimes we got to have healthy disagreements. We got to work on that, people. So, Jeremy Alder.
Right. Amen.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank
I
you,
appreciate
Jacob.
you so much. Like I said before, go stream the album. Go support this guy. And Jeremy, you're always welcome back in the Ex-Homeschoolers Club. Thank you for doing what you do and bringing a smile to people's faces.
Thank you, Jacob. Appreciate it. Can't wait to get my Ex-Homeschoolers Club membership card in the mail. Very excited.
yeah. I got to work on that. That should be the merch, honestly. I've been playing around with some ideas. I'm like, that's probably the move right there. Let's just send out membership cards. But yeah. Well, cool. Well, to the audience, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Hopefully you stayed to the end. I really appreciate those of you who did. And until next week. All right, we'll see you. Peace.